Quorum, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the July meeting of the Fredericksburg Historic Review Board. I'm Sharon Joseph. The Fredericksburg Historic District and landmark properties stand as a testament to Central Texas' rich and layered history. Municipalities have long recognized that historic preservation is a vital tool for maintaining a livable and sustainable community. The Historic Preservation Officer and this board are tasked with translating this broad goal into detailed technical decisions about how to manage change within the historic district. The Historic Review Board is an advisory board appointed by City Council. Approval by this board results in a certificate of appropriateness, and it is required for any work on properties in the historic district or for city landmarks. In considering whether to approve or disapprove an application, the board is guided by the Secretary of the Interior's Standards for Rehabilitation and the City of Fredericksburg Design Guidelines. If anyone present wishes to speak in favor of or opposition to any item on today's agenda, please register at the persons to be heard list, which is on the table in the foyer. It is not necessary to sign up to speak if you are an owner of or a representative for a project on the agenda. You will be called when the case is called, and we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. What I just said does not apply to the public hearing for the adoption of the revised Historic District Guidelines and Standards, which is item 8 on the agenda. How many of you are here to comment on the Guidelines and Standards part? Okay. I only see one hand. Did I miss any behind this monster podium here? Okay. So that is item 8 on the agenda, and the public comments is item 4 on the agenda. Okay. Approval by this board does not take the place of any type of permit. Permits must be obtained for all work. No work of any type is to be started without obtaining the appropriate city permits after the certificate of appropriateness has been issued by the Historic Preservation Officer. Did we have people sign up for the public comment? Okay, thank you. Okay. So following the agenda that you received at the back of the room, there were copies back. They have agendas, right? There were agendas back, and it's on the screen. Okay. Roll call. Larry Jackson. Here. David Bullion. Here. Jessica Middle. Michael McRae. Here. Welcome. New member.
Thank you.
Mike Pennick.
Here.
Richard Laughlin. Barry Kaiser.
Here.
Joe Salinas.
Here.
Okay. So, are both of our alternates voting? Help me.
Yes.
Both alternates are voting. Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving on to public comment. There are none posted, so we'll move on to the Historic Preservation Officer's report.
Jessica.
Anna?
Jessica.
Oh, Jessica's here. So does that mean just Barry's voting and Joe's not?
Right.
All right, Joe, thank you. Barry, you're voting. Okay.
Here.
Welcome. We're glad you're here. Okay, Anna?
Good evening. So the first item I have was actually going to be a recap of last night's special city council meeting, and the only topic was the short-term rental ordinance. And that was a lengthy discussion. We were there till almost 4 hours. It covered a lot, things like trash and noise and parking, some of the low-hanging fruit. There was some consensus to make some changes to those items. I think for this board's interest, there was some discussion on density and R1 lots, but not too much clarity on where that's going to go. So that's still a topic for discussion. So stay posted or stay tuned. But I did bring up the fact that this document that you'll be making a recommendation on tonight does try to address that issue. So we'll discuss that later. The next item I have is the preservation grant. The committees met a couple weeks ago and selected 2 projects. Both of those were owner-occupied structures, one for window repair and one for a roof replacement. And the other item I was going to discuss is we do have a new member, Michael McCree, who's joining us tonight as Eric Parker stepped down and Brad Bertrand. So as you see on your agenda that we have, tonight we have a vacancy, but one of the items in the ordinance amendment would be to reconfigure this board to be 9 regular members instead of 7 regular and 3 alternate. So we're hoping to clear up that issue so we don't have to decide who's voting, and everybody will be voting. So hopefully by the next meeting, that'll be the case.
Thank you, Anna. Move on to the approval of the June 15 minutes, the minutes of the June 15 meeting. On page 3, under staff recommendations, we have appears to be on the city right-of-way. That should be right-of-way. I know y'all use ROW a lot for right-of-way, but, and if you want to use ROW with us, it's fine, but city right-of-way doesn't work for me. Anybody else? Any changes or corrections to the minutes? If there are none, the minutes stand approved as corrected. Moving on to the consent agenda. Or should we do the public hearing? Let's move the public hearing. If no one objects on the board, let's move the public hearing, item 8, up above, item 7. We'll do the public hearing, and then we'll do all the applications for appropriate, if that is okay with y'all. Okay. So what I need is a motion to go out of the meeting and into the public hearing. Someone. Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Okay. We are now in public hearing. What we will, as a board, we will listen to all the testimony. We can ask questions, but we will not make any comments or any decisions. Then after that, we have all the staff comments, and then, after all the testimony and any questions that we have, then we will have to go back into the public meeting, out of public hearing. I'll need a motion for that. Then we will hear staff recommendations, and then we will deliberate and vote on the guidelines and standards. Does that make sense? Did I get that right, Daniel? Thank you. Okay. So, testimony. Eric. And if any of you did not sign up or you did not raise your hand when I asked earlier if you were here for the public hearing, that does not exclude you. When Eric is through, if you want to speak, you're more than welcome. That's what the public hearing is for. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Eric Hamerson. I live in the city. I'd like to thank Anna for all the diligent work that she's put in to the various iterations of this as it's gone on over the months and years, and also to the board for your careful consideration. However, I would respectfully remind the HRB of the language of the wording of City Ordinance number 27007, amended and updated in 2017, and City Ordinance Chapter 23, Section 3, dated 17 March 2021, as posted on your website. Design guidelines for the city of Fredericksburg. Written guidelines adopted by the city council in 1997. As the same, i.e. written guidelines, may be amended from time to time as a reference and guide to provide information on appropriate methods for rehabilitation and restoration of historic residences. There's no authorization in the city ordinance for the HRB to adopt a set of standards, much less to include more than 290 uses of the word required, require, requires, requirements. By comparison, the current design guidelines, not any of those words are used even once. Going from 0 to 297 uses of the word required is not an amendment for a reference and a guide. The proposed final draft of the new guidelines and standards also makes repeated references to the Secretary of the Interior standards. I would respectfully remind the HRB that the Secretary of the Interior standards are federal law, 36 CFR, Section 68, which apply only if the owner has taken advantage of a historic preservation tax incentive program, or the owner has received a grant in aid for development of a project for the property. CFR 36, Section 68 explicitly states that except in those two cases, the Secretary of the Interior standards have, quote, no regulatory effect, end quote, on any properties. So my question to the board, respectfully, is what is your legal authority to defy the city ordinance and federal law? And my second question is, what will be the legal and financial consequences for the city of Fredericksburg and the financial consequences for taxpayers living in this city should a property owner successfully challenge us in court? And I've got copies for anyone who might be interested. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak in the public hearing section of this meeting? Okay, seeing no other people who wish to speak, I would entertain a motion to go out of public hearing. Thank you. A second? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. We are now out of public hearing and back into our meeting, and I'll turn it over to staff for their recommendations.
Okay, so as Mr. Hammerson said, we have been working on this for years now. We did the RFQ for the consultants back in 2019 and hired them around the end of the year and had our first public kickoff meeting pre-COVID, back when we could gather, and we had a very productive first meeting, and this is the third draft, what we're calling the final draft, and it's been a long time coming. The consultants gave us a second draft, and since then, I've been making all those edits. So all the public meetings, gathering all the input, and making those changes. So people that are interested in what actual changes have happened between the second and final draft, on our website, I have that PDF, so you can see my actual hand-tracked changes, small edits, typos to substantive changes. But this has been a very public process, and several steering committee meetings, and I would like to acknowledge everybody that was on the steering committee, members of this board, Board of Realtor representative, local architect representative, chamber representative, local builder association representative, historic society representative, and Jason came in for Brian as another member of the city to sit on the steering committee. The first draft was released in May of 2020, and then we had a few public meetings after that via Zoom that were not so well attended. That was when we were in the kind of the height of COVID lockdown, but we made efforts to have those during the evening and during the day, and keep that momentum going of getting this this document adopted. So then back in October, when we were able to have in-person meetings, we had a very productive, about a 3-hour workshop. And lots of revisions came out of that public input meeting. We were broken out into tables and kind of went through the document almost page by page, definitely chapter by chapter. And then after all that feedback, we did the second draft release in February of 2021. And since then, we've had more open houses and online survey for feedback. So So here's the summary of all those meetings. And then the open houses, like I said, were in April. And while they weren't very high in number, I would say they were very high in quality. People came in with very specific questions about their properties, and board members were there. I was there able to answer specific questions about projects that they might have. We got pretty good feedback. We had about 24 responses to our online survey with specific questions to the design guidelines. So all that to say, it's been a very public process, and appreciate everybody's feedback. Definitely a community effort. So the document itself is broken into 5 sections. Obviously the purpose and scope, architectural character, and this was the format that the 1997 versions had as well. We talk about architectural styles and building forms, and then complex types. Section 3 are the standards and guidelines for historic properties. So if you're going to make an alteration or do an addition or build something new, this is kind of the meat of the document, Section 3. Section 4 being the bibliography, and then appendices with a lot of different reference material. So some of the questions: what's different between the 1997 guidelines compared to the 2021 standards and guidelines? And the biggest difference is using the rating system. So the high, medium, and low rated properties are treated differently, and including some more features that were excluded, maybe or not specifically called out in the 97 guidelines, including chimneys and fencing and lot development pattern. And there's a lot more direction for new construction. And also including the mid-century properties. As you'll remember, when we did the 2018 Historic Resource Survey, we included properties built up to 1968. So the 97 design guidelines definitely didn't speak to the treatment of mid-century properties. So Section 1, the purpose and scope, explains the difference between a guideline and a recommendation, and standards being a requirement as well. But we do break those down. So a high, medium, or low, the rating really affects whether something's going to be required or recommended or required from the right-of-way, if visible from the right-of-way. I do want to draw your attention to this slide. This was some language that we knew we needed to work on. So this is new language for exceptions, because they are standards and they are guidelines, but sometimes there's going to be a project that just can't meet the black and white requirements, but can still meet the spirit of the Secretary of the Interior standards and meet the spirit of the design guidelines. So this is some language that Daniel drafted to allow this board to create or allow exceptions, but we would want you to make those findings based on one of these. The picture of the National Museum of the Pacific War as an example of something that's, very different for the rest of the historic district, but it was such an exceptional purpose and use that we thought, well, this predates me. I'm assuming you guys thought it was exceptional and worthy maybe of approval, even though it couldn't meet the exact design guidelines. So this is an image from the 97 design guidelines. They were broken into recommended and not recommended. They really covered a lot of the same features that we talk about in the 2021 guidelines. And it had images, but it's just a dated document, and the images just haven't held up well because we don't even have a digital version. It's just a PDF. So it just hasn't aged well as far as being visible or viewable online. It covers items such as windows. And again, though, it's breaking it down into high, medium, and low priority. So what would be required for all windows on a high priority would be required for windows that are visible from the right-of-way on a medium-rated property, and then just a recommendation for low-rated properties. And we've got some pretty good images to show, what we're referencing with the requirements. And it goes into pretty good detail, thinking about repair and how to do that, and ways to rehab it. And then they were kind of generic on the replacement. side of things. And so the new design guidelines get more specific, talking about, I think this is a good example of, like the depth. A vinyl window is essentially pinned to the exterior of a wall, where the historic windows were inserted in the middle of the wall. And so it's a completely different visual. There's no shadow lines and such that we're used to seeing with a true divided light window. So just to show kind of some of the things that we're looking at. We get very detailed when we talk about windows. This was a section on new construction, which is kind of generic, designing new construction the same scale, size, and massing as its surroundings, and using materials, colors, and finishes compatible to the surrounding historic structures. So in the new design guidelines, we've got more specific guidance on that. As you know, we're seeing STR permit requests all the time, new construction specifically, and that's changing the lot development pattern. So we have a whole section on what a residential lot has looked like, the development pattern in Fredericksburg over time, with the main structure in the front, plenty of open space, some ancillary uses in the back, maybe a garage, maybe a chicken coop, maybe a shed, but lots of open space. And so, as you know, we're seeing a lot of change to that development pattern. So one way we looked at addressing the issue is by requiring some setbacks. So if that's a high-rated property, there's a high-rated house on the front, that any new structure would have to be set back at least 15 feet. For a medium, that'd be 10 feet, and required if visible from the right-of-way for a low-rated property. And here's an example of that. Here's one that we approved, and this was a high-rated property, and the new structure was not required to be set back a certain distance, and it's definitely crowded in the back. Also in this draft, we put language in for R1 and R2 zone properties, thinking about the footprint of any accessory building, that it would not cover more than the footprint of the primary building. And then any auxiliary building, such as a garage, would not cover more than 800 square feet or 50% of the square footage of the main structure. And we've got some pretty good visuals on the lot development pattern and what's appropriate and what's not. And as this board knows, we're seeing more and more of the STR compounds, and it's just a different development pattern. And sometimes it's not really visible from the street, and sometimes it is. As I said, we did an online survey and had several responses to that, people that had taken the time to review the draft, first draft and or second draft, and give some feedback on specific questions, as in whether or not you would think this document should be requirements or with standards or just recommendations, and 62% said yes, that high-rated properties require more protection than others. And should the HRB be able to restrict lot coverage more so than the base zoning? And 62% also said yes. So all of those are available to see online, all of those responses. Again, the new construction, and this was from day one in our initial kickoff meeting, this definitely stood, the response to this question has remained the same, that new construction is really important in the historic district. That's the feedback we've gotten, that it's important to regulate that. And then just some sample answers to some of the questions we asked. So we are on track to get this adopted. It'll go to council on July 19th for a public hearing, and they could adopt it then, or they could wait for a second reading in August. So that'll be up to council, I guess, depending on what the input is at that public hearing. That is my presentation, and then we also you have a tracked change version of the ordinance revisions in your packet. And so what will happen is that the ordinance will be amended, and then the design guidelines will actually be an attachment or an appendix to the ordinance. And then when the 97 guidelines were adopted, they were, the ordinance was actually an appendix to the design guidelines when it was first adopted. It had later been altered or amended, but that was how it was originally done. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions from the board for Anna? Do any other staff have anything to add? Okay, so we'll go to deliberation by the board on adoption of the historic district design guidelines and standards. I have a motion from Larry Jackson that we accept the historic district guidelines and standards.
I'll second.
Second from Barry. Any?
Before you vote, I just want to clarify that the action tonight is a recommendation from this board to council. So you're not adopting them, they have to go to council. I just want to clarify that that's the action that's being proposed.
Right. But we are recommending adoption. Am I correct in that vocabulary?
Well, whatever recommendation the board wants to make, yes.
So Larry's motion is a recommendation for adoption.
Right.
Am
I interpreted it that way. I'm just
Okay.
sort of clarifying for the record.
Okay. Me too. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we will recommend to City Council adoption of the new Historic District Guidelines and Standards. Recommendation for amendments to Code of Ordinance, Chapter 23, Planning, Article 3, Historic Preservation. I need a motion to make that recommendation for adoption to City Council. I need a motion for this recommendation, for this second.
It's item 9B on the agenda. It's the amendments we discussed concerning reconfiguring the board to 9 members, losing the alternates, move a quorum to 5 instead of 4 because it was technically 7 members before. So it increases the quorum number to 5. There were some other, we addressed, so we changed the definition of design guidelines that was mentioned during the public hearing. We changed that to design guidelines and standards and clarify what those are and the purpose that they serve. Then some references to design guidelines are amended throughout the ordinance to reflect the change to design guidelines and standards. There's some kind of non-substantive changes on some clarity on when the historic preservation officer has to take items from this board to council. Currently, it says the next available meeting, which presents difficulties because like tonight we have a council meeting on Monday. So we've given her a little more time to get that to council. Off the top of my head, I think those are the primary.
And then the changes that follow the state statute for landmarking.
That's correct. Yeah. So, right, so the legislature changed the process for designation of landmarks and districts now. And so we amended the ordinance on the procedure that talks about the Historic Review Board making that designation or expanding it or reducing the district to, in addition to our ordinance, you have to comply with state law. The new bill also requires that an entity that has a Historic Review Board and a Planning and Zoning Commission or any other similar boards, the city has to designate one of those entities as the sole body to hear the recommendation before it goes to council. Apparently, I guess some entities were kind of shopping around whichever board they thought was going to be the most favorable to their proposal, and so the ordinance designates the Historic Review Board for the city as that entity. So any of those recommendations couldn't go through P&Z and then to council, they could only come to here and then to council. But that's only related to landmarking and designation or expansion of the district. Any questions? No, it's a lot, so any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Daniel. Any questions, board members? Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, my first meeting, but did we cover 8B? Are we going in and out of public meetings to, I know we did A. I don't know if he was speaking to both A and B. Did we?
I meant to be speaking to A and B,
Okay, all right.
but if anyone wished to speak on B, we'd have to go out of the meeting and back in. So, but Did I run over any of you that wanted to make a comment in relation to the Code of Ordinance, Chapter 23, Planning, Article 3, Historic Preservation? If I left anybody out, we'll go out into public hearing and come back in so that you can speak. I don't want to, thank you, Michael, I appreciate that. Don't want to miss anybody that,
Sharon, just for the record, I'd recommend that you open that public hearing, then make your request for comments, and then no comments are made or offered, then you can
Okay.
close the public hearing. Just so we'll show that the hearing was offered and there was just no
okay.
input.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Mike makes a motion to go out of public comment into public hearing. Mike seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, we are now in public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak about the amendments to the Code of the Ordinance, Chapter 23, Planning, Article 3, Historic Preservation? If so, you will be heard now. Seeing none, I request a motion to go back into meeting. Mike, was that you? Yeah. Mike, second? Mike, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, we are back into meeting. So we're on item 9B, recommendation for amendments to Code of Ordinance, Chapter 23, Planning, Article 3, Historic Preservation. So this would be our recommendation to City Council to make these amendments to the ordinance.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Larry. Second. Jessica seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we will make that recommendation to City Council. Thank you, Board. Okay, can we back up to item 7, Certificate of Appropriateness Applications, starting with the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are deemed by the Historic Preservation Officer to be routine in nature and will be approved with one motion of the board adopting staff findings and recommendations as part of the approval. The items on the consent agenda will not be discussed. Any member of the board or the public who wishes to discuss an item on the consent agenda may request that it be removed and placed on the individual consideration agenda. Items on the consent agenda are application 2172 for 325 West Main Street, application 2175 for 501 East San Antonio Street, and application 2161 for 211 West Austin. Does anyone on the board or in the public wish to remove any of these from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I request a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, David. A second?
I'll second.
Larry seconds. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, those 3 applications that I listed are now approved. You get your certificate of appropriateness. So if you're here to speak about that property, you don't get to because you are now approved. If you wish to stay, you're welcome to. If you wish to leave, you may. Okay, moving on to Certificate of Appropriateness applications, individual consideration. Application 2173, 514 West San Antonio Street. Okay, Randy, and we let Anna go first.
So application 2173 at 514 West San Antonio. This is an R2 zoned area, and the structure is medium rated. The applicant is requesting to build 3 new STR cottages at 620 square feet each. The cottages will have their own enclosed courtyard and pool and will be constructed toward the back of the property so as not to compete with the historic structure. Proposed exterior materials are stucco and board and batten siding, which are commonly found throughout the district. Final colors will be submitted for approval at a later date, and the plate height of the structures will be 9 feet. Item number 2, they're also requesting to demolish an existing shed. I have cited the relevant Secretary of the Interior standards, the Fredericksburg design guidelines, and the Historic Preservation Ordinance. The size, scale, and materials of the proposed new construction are appropriate for the historic district. The STR compound is a different lot configuration development pattern, but allows for open space between the structures and provides sufficient spacing between the main historic house and the new structures. Given the size of the lot and small size of the structures, mostly hidden from view from the right-of-way, staff recommends approval. The proposed parking is not in keeping with the design guidelines that state off-street parking should be in the rear. At a minimum, the proposed parking in the front side should be screened from the street. The proposed off-street parking will have to meet city parking standards. The shed appears to be of the same vintage as the house. From the photos provided, staff has not been able to determine if it's beyond repair. Given its placement on boards, it could be relocated on the site and continue to be used for storage. If the applicant can show that it is not the same vintage of the house or beyond repair, staff could support removal. And this recommendation is in keeping with the Fredericksburg Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Randy?
Good evening, everyone. Also with me here this evening are the property owners, Wes and Tammy Pack. And I also have Brandon Weinheimer here with my office, who assisted in the preparation of the application. Thank you, everyone, for considering our application this evening. We are proposing 3 new STR units, each approximately just a bit over 600 square feet each. They are being placed towards the back of the property, and we've given, I think, a good amount of consideration to place them and orientate them in such a way to try, as staff indicated, to try to keep as much open space remaining back there as possible. If you're familiar with the property, you'll know that lot has a lot of large trees in it. It's a very beautiful back area. There's only one small group of kind of trash trees that in the very rear of the property that we're proposing to remove. All of the other trees are planned to be retained, and the SDRs nestled in between them. Staff had made mention of the screening of the parking, which should not be a problem for us at all. We've already set the first parking space, which is one of the 3 parallel parking spaces back away from the property line in such a way that we can provide some screening there. We did show a 20-foot wide driveway to satisfy entrance and exit of a fire truck in the event that the fire department needed to get in there for a fire lane. Allows the truck to pull into the property and back out, but with a maximum hose lay area that they require, we need to be able to pull into that lot about 50 feet to be able to get in there and back out again. Staff also mentioned and was questioned the storage building, which I'm glad they did, and we've made some further investigation of that since our application. It is now a portable building that appears to me that it was at best either a building or I suspect maybe 2 buildings that were an old storage building, an old shed that was uprooted probably from its original foundation and placed on a contemporary pad of 2x4 framing, 3/4-inch plywood, metal skirt around that, and treated landscape timbers under it, allowing it to be made mobile. The best I can tell is that the shed is the materials that make up the shed. Most of them are a vintage of an old vintage, but I cannot determine absolutely what vintage that is. I can say that I would say at least 50% of the bottom of those board and battens are pretty significantly rotted. The area where the large fold-open doors are, those are not original, and at least 50% of the siding on that side of the building is not original. I think at least 2 of the 3 window openings on them is not original. So all in all, I think it's made of vintage materials, but it's been significantly altered from its original state that it was in. Can it be relocated on the site? I suppose it could if that's a requirement of yours, but it's not needed for the function of this property. And I think one thing that makes this property beautiful now, and our intent is with this development, is to continue to keep as much open space as possible. As you can see from the site plan, behind the main house, there's already several auxiliary structures there. If we kept this storage building, it would have to go somewhere in that remaining open space between the back of the main house and those auxiliary structures and these new STR units. So our preference would be to allow our clients to remove that building and from the property. So with that, I'll just open it up to questions that you might have.
Thanks, Randy. Questions? Anybody? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Just because there is a standard about these buildings and the shed building, I understand everything you said, but is there a particular exception that you're trying to go under, or are you just saying you don't know enough information to know if it even fits? I was unclear on that.
Whether it would fit on the property?
Well,
or
no, is there an exception to the standards that are in play, that it's beyond repair, it's not original, it's not?
Well, I think, I don't know if I would say it's an exception, but from my professional opinion, looking at the modifications that have been made to that building to put it on this portable pad, to me have been significant, to the point that I think that it's been so much altered from its original state, and I think it even has evidence that there may be two buildings put together as one. There's what appears to be a demising wall in the middle that looked like it might have been originally an exterior wall, but it's difficult to tell. But it makes me suspect that the building itself is not even in its original configuration anymore. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does, and I probably wouldn't have any opposition. The difficulty is just the information we have is kind of not.
I appreciate that.
And I'm not trying to be difficult. I just.
No, sir. I appreciate that, and that I think that's evidence of staff's great attention to detail, which we appreciate as design professionals, and it sometimes puts us to task to study it more. So we have since done that since we made the application, because I suspected and would enjoy further discussion about that this evening, but. To the best of my knowledge and experience, I think that building is possible. It's not even in its original configuration, but it has been modified, I believe, significantly to get it on a contemporary new portable pad.
I've got a question. I've got a couple issues with the application, but the first one, since you're up here, is the location of the hot tubs that are at the back of each of the units.
Yes.
It seems to be that's kind of setting up an issue for noise violations. I mean, all of the noise is going to be pointed towards your neighbors.
Right.
And not interior. And so I think kind of a neighborly thing to do would be to put the hot tubs on the inside to keep your neighbors from, calling the cops on you. So.
I think that's a good point, David. But one thing we were trying to balance was privacy to the neighbors, but also privacy to the people who are using these. Each of those hot tub areas are screened so that they're not open to the property. So we have the perimeter fencing, which we're not proposing at this point to be a privacy fence, but each of the hot tub areas are screened. And these are single units. There's not going to be multiple people there, but each of those areas are screened individually.
I'd still prefer to see them pointed to interior as opposed to exterior for issues with the neighbors. So.
Yeah, that would be difficult in trying to keep an entry to each of those areas, which we'd have to do around the perimeter, I suppose. But
you're a good designer. So.
Yes, thank you, David.
So.
Any other questions? Anybody? Any questions for Randy?
What is the square behind the cabana? Sorry, what is the square behind the existing cabana with the circle in the middle?
That is basically an outdoor sitting area.
Okay.
It's an open structure. And I think you can see that in one of the photos I took. It's in the foreground. Let me see if I can point that. Yes, you'll see that in the bottom picture. It's got a fire pit area. Of the pages that you have with photos, it'd be the second page, I believe.
Okay.
It's the one below the driveway.
Yeah,
So it's just an open seating area around a fire pit.
okay.
Yeah, just one other question, Randy.
Yes, sir.
Was there any effort to put the parking where we were just speaking of? Could you orient the parking? I know it would divide the structures and kind of, I know nobody wants to look at a car if they're coming out of their rental unit, but would that be a spot where you could orient more parking in the back versus along the side?
The difficulty is that in the back is where all the trees are, and that's where we're trying to nestle those units in.
Okay.
So I think it would be very difficult to save those trees if we started moving vehicles back there. And that would, trying to keep that natural setting back there, it seemed to us to be natural to keep the vehicles towards the front where there is a driveway already, by the way. That driveway is, most of that driveway we're showing actually already exists.
Yeah, so I guess my main issue with the application is the density, is the increase of occupancy. I mean, the application's requesting more than 150% increase. I went online and looked at the current offering, and basically it's listed as up to 8 people in the current 2 structures. So if you use that as the base, the 3 new units are going to be 2 to 4 persons each, so we're looking at 14 to 20 people on location. And so that's pretty excessive in my view. And of course, with that many occupants, it kind of blows the parking requirements as well. If you have 20 people there, you're going to need, a lot more parking than what you have listed. So
Well,
the density is my big issue here, but you're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. I know it's an R2, but still, this is a hotel motel with 20 people, occupying the location. So it's an issue for me.
I understand that. Good points. But I believe we do meet the parking requirements for the city parking requirements for the 5 units. So that's why we provided 5 parking spaces.
You're going to have 14 to 20 people, right?
I understand, that's true, but that's a challenge we have with the parking requirements everywhere in the city too, and they're minimum standards. We understand
I
that.
think Tammy's saying no, they're not. How many will you have?
The cottages are 2 each, period.
Okay.
Not 4, there's no sleeper cell, there's 1 king bed, period. So those are 2, 2, and 2.
Okay.
So that can be 6, and then you could have up to a maximum of 8, so that could be a maximum of 14.
And you said we're back up to commercial.
All of our neighbors that help Airbnb on all the sides of those hot tubs with privacy fences, all of them, Airbnb on each side. But the cottages are 100% for occupancy of 2. Nobody put-
Any other questions?
Picture the neighborhood.
Do you have a picture of the screen, the hot tub screens, or what material will they be?
Around the spas, they would intend to just be to be a wood screen, a wood fence.
Okay.
What would the height be?
We're proposing 6 feet.
About 6 feet?
We've had a request for the neighborhood, so Anna's pulling that up.
Okay.
What did y'all do before Google Maps?
We had lots of pictures taken. We had lots of photos taken by staff. They walk around in the backyards and stuff. It was not like Google Maps.
So Randy, will any of those be visible from Bowie Street?
Did you say from Creek?
Bowie.
Bowie.
I drove by. I mean, the lot is really deep and it's really hard to kind of see back there. There's a lot of really great trees. I'm very glad you're keeping them all.
I mean, I think from the street, they're going to be pretty nestled back there. And again, there's already a driveway pretty much of this, very close to the size that we're showing already towards the front.
And that brick property on Blue that you just saw, the red brick is now in the B&B, and that's what backs up to that side hot tub there. The back hot tub one goes to what fronts on Main Street was Dodd's.
Yeah, it used to be Dodd's Nursery, yes.
B&B, so
Yes.
that's the three ones.
Any more questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept application 21-73. I think it looks really nice. I love that you could really, I think, build more, and I like that they're all spaced out.
Thank you.
Accept it as is.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, board? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So we have one opposed. Thank you. It's approved.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Randy. Okay. Application 2174, 116 East Austin. Anna?
Application 2174, 116 East Austin in the Central Business District. The applicant is requesting approval to replace original wood windows with Pella Impervia double-hung fiberglass windows, existing frames to remain. I've cited the relevant sections of the Fredericksburg Design Guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior Standards. The Beckman House at 116 East Austin Street has been very well taken care of, and the windows in question are not in need of repair. Windows are a character-defining feature. Replacement has been approved by the board before when windows are beyond repair with in-kind materials and sometimes a clad product over a wood window that matches the profile and size of the original. There are numerous ways to improve the energy efficiency of wood windows, such as adding weather stripping or interior film. Replacement of original features diminishes the integrity of structures, eventually reducing the rating. Of note, there is a decorative lead glass feature at the top of the window that should not be modified. The applicant has provided information on Pella Impervia double-hung fiberglass option. The proposal is to replace sashes and not the entire frame or jamb. And staff has requested more details on this request, including examples of where this type of replacement has been successful. Staff does not recommend removal of the original windows, and this recommendation is in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior Standards Number 6 and Fredericksburg Design Guidelines for windows. Of note, the exterior windows screens have been removed and an exterior film has been installed, and that was done without a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay. Who is speaking for this property? Dennis? Welcome.
Just brought on a photo, purchased property, pass around. Okay. It looked like when I acquired the property back in 2001. So thank you for letting me come back and appear before you. The last time we met, I was not very well prepared for this presentation. I assumed that it would go a lot better than it did. The proposed replacement windows are basically identical to the existing, and I think it'd be very hard to tell the difference since they're behind the screens. I mentioned that previously. To me, it kind of seems like you have 2 glasses of tea on the counter up here, one's sweet and one's unsweet. You can't tell the difference by looking at it. So, y'all indicate that your hands are tied by the Secretary of the Interior guidelines pertaining to historical buildings and such. If they have such a tight grip on things allowed over historical features, I'm wondering how they allow things such as the Christopher Columbus statue to be removed, Columbus Park in San Antonio. I don't recall anybody getting sued over that, and it seems that if I replace my windows without consent, I can get sued. Am I the only one that sees a double standard with that? And I really don't care what the Secretary of Interior thinks, he or she. They don't have to walk in my shoes, and they don't have to sit in my noisy office or pay my utility bills. Which brings me to an interesting point somebody brought up to me after my column in the paper, and it's called Follow the Money. They said the city doesn't care about your utility bill. After all, you're buying your electricity from them. The more your windows leak, the more they make. Multiply that times the number of windows that the Historical Review Board thinks are essential, and multiply that out and look at the numbers that the city is hauling in. By the way, from the comments I received from my column, it appears that not many people give 2 cents about my windows. Based on the calls and I get, everybody was agreeing that I should have the right as personal property rights to improve my property to see how it works for me. I do have a representative from Pella Windows here tonight. Right there. Did you bring a window sample? Okay, I thought he was going to bring a window sample.
He did last time.
He did last time, and nobody wanted to look at it. So, I do have a little slide presentation that we can hook up to the screen. You have a flash drive? Yep.
Before you get to that, just for clarity, could you tell us the difference in this application versus the one that we reviewed last month or 2 months ago?
Sure. These are fiberglass windows. The ones that I was proposing to use earlier were vinyl. In my original application, I was going to use Window World type windows. After I filed the application, I did some more research and discovered that the Pella windows I thought were much better quality, and so that's what I came with when I spoke to you, but the presentation had Window World windows in it. Since then, I've done some research and shared with Anna several articles that I found online about the quality of windows and efficiency and such. One of them, and I think you had them in the package that you gave to the board, did you not? Those screenshots that I clipped from the internet?
We have a whole bunch of Pella information, but
Yeah.
I don't see any screenshots.
I guess maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. The biggest thing that we see a lot of applications, I don't remember them all, but the biggest difference between this application and the last one you presented, that you're only requesting to change the window packs, the sashes. Previously, you were going to replace everything?
No, I was not. I never intended to replace everything. There is nothing wrong with the frames on my building, nothing. They were just going to be simple windows put in, just like I'm proposing to do now. Put the windows back in exactly the same place they are. Set back up against the interior trim, screens go back on. So
I do recall, just for clarification, I think the assumption by the board was that he was taking out the jam and everything like that, because that was some of the conversation piece on damaging the structure when that gets removed. So
That's how I recall it. It was an entire replacement. This application is different.
That was not the way it was intended to be presented. Not at all.
The board's mistake, but this application is for sure just replacement of the window sashes,
That's it.
what we call a window pack.
Right.
So is this
can
your
you go-
slideshow, Dennis?
Sorry?
Is this your slideshow?
It is.
Okay,
So
let's go.
go to the slide number 1, right there. That is a shot of the window closest to Austin Street on the west side of the building facing the title company. Next one, please. That is a shot of that same window with one screen removed to show you what the existing window looks like. Next one, please. That's with both screens removed. Next. That is with a Pella window photoshopped into one of those windows and obviously screens in place. And can anybody tell me what the difference is between the two? There they are side by side, the photoshopped window on one side and the original first photograph that you saw on the other side. That is a picture of the window that we used to Photoshop, which is the example window that we want to use. And now that tells you which window was Photoshopped, the one on the left. And there it is Photoshopped with the original window on the right. And I think that's the last screen, right? So, I was going to bring Jeremiah up to show you the window, but that's not going to happen.
So,
Any questions of Jeremiah?
so Dennis, the one where you've removed the screens and put the vinyl sign on, are you going to put the original screens back over
Absolutely.
that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Dennis, what were we going to do with the leaded glass?
Nothing. Leave it there. Just replace the bottom window.
Okay.
That glass is going nowhere.
Those are really nice windows. Thank you.
Yep.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't replace it with a Pella wooden double hung?
It's cost prohibitive. It's crazy.
So just cost, that's.
It's cost. And there's no difference. If I replaced these windows in the cover of darkness at night, or you did it with a magic wand, nobody would ever know I did it. It's that simple, in my opinion.
And Dennis, are the window sashes deteriorated, but you cannot repair them? Are they completely deteriorated?
There is nothing wrong with them except they leak and they're noisy as hell. It is hard to think in there. When ambulances, fire trucks, Cummins diesel trucks, motorcycles, 20 and 30 motorcycles on a Saturday come through there, the windows literally rattle and you have to stop a conversation. Whether it's on the phone or somebody sitting across the desk from me.
And the removal of the screens with the sign, was that something that you had approval for? This is my first time on the board, so.
No, I did that, I guess, kind of to spite you guys, and it didn't go exactly the way it was supposed to, I'll say that. And I got on Lee Bodenheimer about it, because that film was supposed to go on the inside, because I can do anything on the inside of my windows that I want. And those were the instructions to Lee, to put it on the inside, and I find out that he has to put it on the outside for some reason. I don't know why that is, but he said it doesn't work on the inside, and he had them up already, so there you are.
Are you going to keep those up if you replace the windows?
Absolutely not. No, all of that is coming down, screens are going back.
Okay.
Have any questions for Jeremiah? Or do you have anything to add?
I just want to say that the structure is not.
So, Jeremiah, could you come to the microphone? And would you explain to us in window technology, exactly what you're going to do, please.
As far as the installation, well, hi, everybody, I'm Jeremiah.
Wait, state your name again, please.
Jeremiah Cisneros, I'm with Pella Windows and Doors.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And so as far as the install goes, you'll notice that we don't take out the frame of the window. We just remove both sashes and a new window goes in place. So the frame opening, as far as all, the rest of the structure will not be messed with at all. The size of the window stays the same.
But there'll be some sort of jet liner or something to take care of the spring balances, or what's gonna?
The window will have its own frame, and there will be, our
You're
balancers.
basically putting in a window frame within the window frame.
Correct, yes, sir.
Any other questions for Jeremiah? Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come.
Thank you.
And if I could, I would like to share with the board. I met with Mr. Kuzenberger after a couple weeks after his article. We discussed that. We discussed some options moving forward. I believe he was unaware of some of the appeal processes and things like that. We had a conversation. I did tell him that he could, reapply with the change. This is a little bit different than what we saw last time. I did inform him that staff recommendation is obviously going to stay the same because we go by our code. Anna's very good at her job, and so I wouldn't want her to change that in any way. The only thing I want to share with Dennis, we probably talked about 45 minutes. It was a little bit eye-opening for me to discuss that noise there at that light. I don't know if it's the text dot, because of the road, but we did stop our conversation several times. So as far as the sound and issues like that with that, I do understand where he's coming from. So that was something that I don't think I expected. I expected a level of noise. I live in an old house with old windows, but that was a little bit more than what I assumed was kind of the norm. So I just kind of wanted to share that information with you guys.
Thank you, Jason.
Dennis, if you take those out and it's accepted, what are you going to do with the windows that are in there now?
I imagine somebody would probably like to have them. I mean, I don't think they're not going to get destroyed when you pull them out, right? Yeah. I mean, I have no need for them. I don't intend to take them to the trash pile. I intend to see if anybody can use them.
Do any of them have the original glass in?
Some of them do. Some got broken. We did the remodel, but there are some that have the original glass and have a little bit of wave to it. But quite a few of them got broken. Some of them were broken when I acquired the property.
Because they're making that glass now. It's really expensive, so somebody would probably really want that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions for Dennis? I have a comment to make. Since your comment on follow the money went into the record, as one who has an older house with all the original windows and a work right on the street, right on San Antonio Street, just like you do, I have to say it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with our understanding of the application. There's no money involved in this board. There's no money involved in what they do other than their salary. So I take offense at your statement about following the money.
That wasn't my statement. That was somebody.
You are the one who put it in our record tonight.
Okay.
It will be part of public record. I usually don't comment as chairman, but because I live in an old house that has original windows in it, I feel like I had to defend the city and this board on that statement.
Okay.
So, okay.
Fair.
Now, if there are no other questions.
I have one more question. Sorry, just say my head for Randy. Is there an exception that you're pointing to that the standards or requirements don't apply, or that you have an exception to that requirement? Is there something you're pointing to for this board?
I guess my answer to that, it goes back to the 2 glasses of tea. Once I put them in, you can't tell the difference, and I don't see who's going to get heartburn over those windows being replaced, besides, I guess, you guys. I don't think anybody else cares. And nobody will know, because now it's all been a big stink here, but the windows, everybody will know, but just driving by, you can't tell. And I think that showed in the photos that we prepared for you. We didn't do anything, we didn't thin down the window, we didn't thicken anything up. Only thing we did was take the pillow window and slide it in there. So I just don't see what the big deal is about not allowing somebody to replace them. And especially when you guys, other people replace them, like the Avery house that got replaced and without permission, and they wound up putting, they have screens back on them. Right across the street from me in the, behind the old Palace Theater, they redid that nice bed and breakfast. Beautiful job. I'm sure that's one of the nicest B&Bs in town. But they put nice insulated windows in the front. They don't even have screens on them. And then, you got the parking garage in the next block over from me. That thing's not historic, and you're talking about an eyesore, and you think my windows are going to be an eyesore. Maybe you need to go back over there and look at the parking garage and see what kind of an eyesore that is. And that's in broad daylight, plain view. So I just don't get the gist of the denial.
But you're not answering his question. That's an answer?
I think your answer was there wasn't an exception. You weren't pointing to an exception that the...
No. Okay. It just, I think common sense needs to prevail that there's no good reason other than a Secretary of the Interior who doesn't know me and doesn't know Fredericksburg, doesn't know we exist. He doesn't know what's good for me.
Okay.
Would you agree to one question I have? Is there a difference between an original object? Excuse me. An original object and a copy of an original object? For example, if you went to a museum and you were going to see a bunch of Picasso paintings, but they said, now some of these are fakes, would it matter? Which is real, which is fake, would it matter?
If I'm there looking at it, no, it ain't going to matter.
Would it matter in terms of the museum? Some are fake and some are real. Would it diminish the value of the exposition if some were real and some were fake?
It probably would.
And I think that's the position that the Secretary of State takes, or Secretary of Interior takes, and we take. If there is a difference between what's original and antique and historic and what is new, even if it looks original and antique and historic. If it's not, it's not. And that's our position. That's not trying to be difficult to you or being obtuse. It's just a simple fact that our charge is to maintain the integrity of the history of Fredericksburg. And we can't do it if we allow things that are serviceable and not rotten and not ruined to be changed just because of convenience. That's our position.
Function has nothing, function doesn't come into play anywhere.
There's a lot of things you could do without changing the appearance of it. We've talked about that. You know, that's your choice not to pursue that. But there's things you can do interior-wise. Perhaps not as appealing to you, but more appealing to us. But
well, those things that I looked online were pretty Southern engineered in appearance.
Okay. And I don't disagree with you on that.
Yeah. So, there's another comment that I'd like to make. Somewhere in a recent meeting, not too far down back, Anna made a comment about modernization needing to be considered by the board in some of these requests. To me, that sounds like upgrades similar to standards that are required by new home construction when it comes to tightness and energy efficiency. How can you possibly require or mandate one department of the city and on the other hand, deny the same principle based on the look? I'm sure my German ancestors would have had the option to insulate windows back in the day as tight as they're known to be, or as I prefer to say, frugal. They would have used insulated windows to reduce that monthly bill. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Any other questions?
Anybody have a question? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. One way or the other.
Well, I think Dennis has probably done a pretty good job, actually. And the pictures he showed us as Richard Laughlin said in our last meeting, if you have the screens up there, you really don't see anything, and he showed us that. So I think he's done a good job preserving the building, and I move that we accept.
Larry moves for approval. Is there a second to that motion?
Is there an opportunity to have further discussion before we vote, or is?
Yeah.
Yes. Once we have a second, then we'll open for discussion.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jessica. We have a motion and a second, so I'm opening it to the board for discussion.
I've been looking at the guidelines a lot lately, on especially windows, and because that seems to be the biggest issue that we have when we deny an application is on the window. So I'm going back and looking at our current design guidelines, our new ones, and this word keeps coming up to me is compatible. And basically, you have up on the screen, we're supposed to repair when we can, and then it says when we do bring new materials, is it compatible? So a question I have for the board is what Mr. Kusenberg presented in the application, is it compatible physically and chemically? Because that's what our guidelines say. And he's basically, in my view, it shows that it's physically compatible. It's just not, it's not wood. But can it be painted? Can it look, is it chemically compatible? So I keep going back and forth internally with my own review of the guidelines because it appears to be physically and chemically compatible. But I know the value that historical properties have. They're on a per square foot basis, they're probably 2 or 3 times more valuable than new construction, the original stuff. So I think we need to ask ourselves, is the application as presented, is it compatible?
Okay. Other comments, board members?
So instead of it being beyond repair, it's more of a, you're thinking on a window question, it's not an issue of if the existing window is not repairable, then clearly there's some.
Define repairable. Is it rotted? That obviously needs repair. But there are other things that require repairment, like energy efficiency and noise as well. I see that the current guidelines is giving us some latitude when it comes to replacement. And when things are replaced for whatever reasons, we need to make sure that it is physically and visually acceptable and compatible. So it's just one view.
I would just say, as someone that does this, a lot of this, you're going to have everybody now from this point forward coming under the compatible exception, because there are, windows are, as David said, one of the big issues when you're doing restorations. So I think the board needs to be prepared for a whole lot of applications to forevermore replace the windows, even if they're not in disrepair or deteriorated.
So you're referring to not recommended replacing old windows and features with new material that is not physically or chemically compatible with the old, and that changes or alters the visual appearance of the building.
Correct.
Is that?
That's my whole comment here, is that from the evidence that was presented, it does appear to be physically compatible, and you're keeping the original window frames and you're replacing the sashes. The only thing, if the applicant were doing it with wood, it'd be a slam dunk in my view. But we do have some language in there about replacing materials as well. So for me, that's a sticking point.
Other comments?
From a builder's standpoint, Michael and Barry, is it possible just to switch out the glass to more energy efficient, noise reducing glass? if that's.
It might be.
Repaired?
It might be, but there's a lot of other issues. And the window gets a lot heavier, and the sash balances don't work. So the weights have to be replaced. I mean, Dennis alludes to, there's a lot of issues that it's not just as easy as saying, well, let's just make it a quieter window. It's hard to do. I mean, I think he's got valid points with all of his arguments. It's the question I have is that our job? I mean, these old houses, in many cases, are never going to be, you can't go inside those walls and insulate them the way a modern house is insulated. That's one of the detriments. And then his is probably an example of a better, much more modern house than a lot of them that we see. They're even harder to bring up to standards. Sometimes it's impossible. So if our goal is to make those windows work better for Dennis or the public in general, then I think we have to go with his request. But it's no longer going to be a historic window, no matter how it looks. It's always going to be a replacement.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to call for the vote. The motion is to accept the application as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to call for a count. Larry?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Michael?
No.
Mike? Penny? Richard's not here. Barry?
No.
3-3. I vote no. So it's 4-3. The motion does not carry. Application is not approved. Okay. Moving on to 313 East Travis, application 2177.
Sharon?
Yes, Daniel, I'm sorry.
So there was a motion to approve the application. That motion wasn't carried. So we still don't have any action from the board, like affirmative action to deny the application
Okay.
or some
I need a motion.
alternative.
Somebody needs to make a motion to
So we still
deny.
need some
That's what we're gonna
action
do.
from the board.
Okay.
Sorry to keep it going.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. So I need a motion to deny with a second.
I make a motion to deny.
Okay. I have a motion to deny. Is there a second?
Make a second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Account stays the same. Motion is denied. Thank you, Daniel, for straightening us out. Okay. Application 2177 for 313 East Travis. Anna?
Application 2161.
2177.
Yep. Okay, 2177 at 313 East Travis, an R1 zone, medium-rated property. The applicant is requesting approval to build 2 small storage or office sheds, 10 by 22 and 12 feet high, to be built on poured concrete slabs. Proposed style and pictures are attached. The shed on Washington side will observe a 15-foot setback from the street. And they are also requesting a variance that you don't approve, but not meeting the setback on the back for the shed to allow for only a 2-foot setback from the rear property line. The shed will be 5 feet from the fence. Cited as relevant Secretary of the Interior standards and the Fredericksburg design guidelines. Staff recommendation, the property is a corner lot with the main house sitting close to the interior property line, making the side and rear yard highly visible. The side street provides access to parking and the rear of the property. The size, scale, and materials of the proposed new construction are appropriate for the district. The gambrel roof lines are not typical of the historic district. The placement of a structure near Washington Street should be pushed back towards the back interior corner of the property. Staff recommends the alternate style structure with a more common roof pitch and color. This recommendation is in keeping with the Fredericksburg design guidelines for new construction, and the applicant will need to pursue a variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment if the HRB allows the new structure to be only 2 feet from the rear property line. Staff recommends the new structure meet zoning setbacks.
We have some incorrect pages in our package, I think. Did you? We've got the 514 West San Antonio.
Okay.
In the middle of, it's just right behind the application. So if you go over to the pencil drawing that got Washington on it, Washington and East Travis, that's correct. And moving forward from there is the application we're looking at. Okay. Are you through, Anna?
Yes.
Okay. Carlo Rivera. Is anyone here to speak for the property? Okay. But we don't have to have someone, right? We don't have to have someone.
The application is considered incomplete until they
If there's not a representative, so it just moves on to next month?
can move it to next month.
Okay.
How can we approve something that doesn't follow code?
You wouldn't be, as I said, they would still have to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, but the ZBA would want to know if you are recommending approval. It's kind of a chicken egg. Can they get the variance without your approval, or can they get the, so it wouldn't be a done deal even if you recommended approval. It would still have to go to ZBA.
Fence, that be code? Because it looks like
It's 6 foot and it's on,
6 foot.
that was what was approved. I didn't go out and measure it after, but that was what was approved.
Okay, so no action on application 2177. We've done items 8 and 9 on the agenda. The only thing left that I know of is,
Sorry, I was just going to clarify on when the applicant doesn't appear, you move it to the next meeting for up to 2 more meetings, and if they don't appear, if nobody appears to present the application, then it's considered withdrawn. So we
Okay.
have 2 more opportunities to appear.
thank you. Okay. What? Yes. Come talk to us. Introduce yourself for the record.
Tom Musselman, I'm a city councilman of the city of Fredericksburg. So the question I had in looking at this application and looking at the buildings that Mr. Rivera is proposing to use, I would like to know if there's been any discussion with the applicant as to his use of these buildings. Is he going to use these buildings as residential buildings, or are they fancy places to put riding lawnmowers?
My understanding, and I don't really get into use too much because it's not the purview of the Historic Review Board, but I was told one would be a shed for storage and one would be an office.
Okay, so that was, I mean.
We haven't had any discussion, but.
Okay, all right. So just want to make sure that you're not being put up for an STR without going through the process of STR. And then I would also ask
Jason's locked out. Can you?
No, leave him outside. The other question I have is that I've driven by this fence, and it's a coyote fence. And I'm not sure if I have no reason to think that it doesn't meet code, but it would be easy to find out if it does meet code, and maybe you can recommend to the city that they send somebody out with a tape measure to make sure that it does meet code.
Okay.
Because it looks to me like most coyote fences I've seen have usually been cut off so that they're.
Good idea. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you. Appreciate you.
On that comment, my question is for the intended use of it. If we approve something for use as storage shed or even an office, can we forbid it from being used as a short-term rental in the future?
That's not your purview. If it meets the zoning requirements and they meet the city building and zoning setbacks, then they have the right to use it. You don't dictate use, the zoning does.
Even though the STR comes with a different set of requirements with parking?
It would need to go through, so we have a site plan review process for the STRs. So there's the cities, you're not the only city entity looking at it, yeah.
Good question. Thank you, David.
Sharon, thank you for letting me back in. I appreciate that.
Did you want to join the meeting and say something, or just want to come back?
Just wanted to come back. Thank you.
I was the only one who saw you. And I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Musselman, so we got you in. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
What's our next meeting?
August, I don't know.
You want to move it? Let's see.
August 10th? David says August 10th, is that?
I'll be out of town.
Me too. But Jason will cover.
I still won't have to call.
Need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I need a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Meeting is adjourned at 6:59.
Pick it up and do that.